Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new, long overdue, eagerly anticipated, highly sought after. Is that enough superlatives for you, Daven? How do you feel about that?
Sounds
Is that
good.
the right use of superlative? I feel very smart
no
using
idea.
a long word like that. No.
Actually, not
Could be wrong. People
100%
like
sure what
Simon's
that
so
word means.
dumb. Oh, well, the BrainFood Show is back. It's been a while.
And
It's
lot
been a while. It's
now.
been a couple
I
of
know
months.
we say that every time, but for real, I have 5 episodes planned out, and we're gonna
Yeah,
knock
all
them
right,
out
mate. We'll see about
in the
that.
next month. yeah,
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
There, you've seen the
Look,
notes. They're there.
I eagerly anticipate these as much as you do, I think. I'm just
Yeah.
turning down my volume. I think I'm deafening people at the moment. There we go. It's been so long that I think I must have knocked some knobs on my mixer because,
Oh yeah.
I've it's been months. Dust has accumulated. I had to blow it off.
Yeah, well, some of the listeners can't see, but the YouTube can. I'm on my patio at the moment, so my setup is also different. Hopefully this works.
La-di-da, you've got a patio.
A fire going at the moment.
I'm in my basement.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today? How have you been? Is it you're I see
Excellent.
you've got a fire going on your patio. This
Yes.
is some fancy shit. That's great.
Yeah, it's good. Good.
Wow.
It's
You're
quite
taking
enjoyable.
this podcast to a new level.
And you know that like there was that one time last winter where it was all snowy and whatnot, and I was like saying like I was putting like not how many hours it took to do a script or whatever for a video, but actually
But
how many logs on the
of the
fire.
fire?
We're sitting out in my patio and it's snowing, and you got the fire going. It's quite nice, quite enjoyable. But yes,
I've got a.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say I've got a fireplace and like there's all this logs from the previous owner, but he didn't live there for a couple of years before we moved in, and all the logs are incredibly dry. So they're these giant logs, and I'm like, this will last a couple of hours, and then it's like 20 minutes later you're throwing on another giant log just because they're so dry.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it makes it really hot.
Yeah, totally. So what are we talking about today? For the appetizer, we are going to talk. Well, in general, we're talking.
Are we sticking with the food things?
No. Yes, we are.
Okay,
That was a
great.
good idea. I felt like that person had.
Yeah,
that I
yeah.
came up with that we mentioned in the
I
last
know.
episode. But this,
And you were like, this is genius, Simon. I was like, yeah, it's all right.
this series is medieval times, so that's going to be kind of what we're talking about, various things about medieval times, just aspects of life and interesting things, and it's really good. And to start, we're going to talk a lot about crap, like just, like the practical side of that. But for the appetizer today, we're just going to start. Have you ever wondered why the toilet is sometimes called the crapper?
Thomas Crapper. It's got something to do with Thomas Crapper.
It does have a Thomas Crapper and Co. Limited.
Knew it.
This
Look
is
at me
still
using
a thing
superlative,
in England.
great knowledge of history.
Is this still a thing? Because toilets in England at the time were around World War I when this started to become a thing, and U.S. soldiers are the one that popularized it. A lot of toilets said Thomas Crapper and Co. Limited. Is that still a thing in England?
Totally.
It is.
I mean, I don't know if it's still a thing, but I grew up in an old Victorian house.
Oh.
And there was like, most of the bathrooms have been renovated, but there was this one bathroom off the utility room, and it had like this, I don't know if you have these, but back in the day, the toilet, is it the cistern, the thing with all the water in, was high above the toilet.
No, that's like a classic British water closet thing. But like I don't think that's really a thing ever in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, no, this is a thing. And my school also had these super old toilets, and they'd also have these elevated cisterns. Like, I mean, they'd be a good foot above your head, 2 foot above your head, and they'd fill with water, and then you'd grab this chain thing that hangs down. Why am I talking about this? People know what a toilet is. But this really old one that I this bathroom in my house had Thomas Crapper and Co. Like, not embossed into it, but when you cast metal or whatever, and it's got the something, so it sticks out. My knowledge
embossed,
of engineering is small.
Totally.
But there you go. I only know embossed because of Photoshop. So
yeah, totally. So yes, this was U.S. soldiers kind of saw this and they thought it was funny because Thomas Crapper, the crap. But this seems to make sense for us now. But at the time, it did not make sense to like the British at the time, because while the word crap had been around in England to mean like rubbish and things like this previously, it was around the 16th century that it kind of faded away in England. But in the U.S., it still was a thing. Like it came over in English there, and that word kind of continued to mean what crap, rubbish, whatever, trash. And so they just thought it was funny that you have a toilet, Thomas Crapper. And so the U.S. soldiers thought it was funny in World War I, so they just started calling toilets the Crapper. And then, it just sort of caught on in the U.S. and whatnot. Is it like, have you ever heard anyone call the toilet the Crapper in Britain?
We'd definitely and joyously say, I'm going to take a crap.
Okay, so it's come back.
Which is bizarre because you don't really take anything. If anything, I'm giving a crap. That's not my joke. I don't remember where I stole it from, but I love it.
So that's interesting because the word kind of fell out in Britain, but now it's back. But so that's kind of so who was Thomas Crapper? People are probably wondering. So he was born around 1836, died around 1910, and himself, he was a famous plumber. And you might say like a plumber, like what does that even mean? And so basically,
well, Thomas Crapper, man, he's got his name over it. It's like whoever Vilroy and Bock are, they're famous like toilet makers. They're everywhere.
Yeah. So
like, if someone was like Vilroy, I'd be like, oh, of the Vilroy and Bock toilet makers.
So he was a famous plumber because he was the official plumber of the royal family, among other things. He also owned one of the largest plumbing companies in England, and at the time he also was the guy who invented the ball cock. Do you know what the ball cock is in the toilet?
Is that thing that drops down and lets it know when it's needs some water?
It's the floating
going
part.
Into it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. The thing that
the
floats
ball
up
cock.
and gets the little thing off. So yeah, so that is that. So you might wonder, so the Crapper, we have the Crapper, but what about why is the toilet called the John? And that is after one Sir John Harrington, or at least it was popularized by Harrington, because there is actually references of the toilet being called the Cousin John before that, but also the Jake was another one, among other terms. But it's thought Sir John Harrington was the one who actually popularized this, or it became popular, this term, because of him, precisely because. So what did Sir John Harrington do? So he lived in the late 16th and early 17th centuries, and so he was one of the 102 godchildren of Queen Elizabeth I, and he was nicknamed the Saucy Godson because he just wrote a lot of risque poetry and other writings and whatnot. So he actually got banished a lot for these things, and then he would just be readmitted to court or whatever, or Britain. So what did he do? Why is he associated with the toilet? So he devised Britain's first known ever flushing toilet called the Ajax, and that's derived from the aforementioned Jake's slang term for the toilet. And specifically how he kind of popularized this, because this Ajax thing wasn't actually super popular at first, but so he wrote a new discourse upon a stale subject, the metamorphosis of Ajax. And so this was
it sounds like a Jules Verne novel.
Yeah,
the metamorphosis of Ajax.
It was ostensibly about his invention, but it was actually about political. It was kind of a political allegory, and just about how excrement was poisoning the state and whatnot. So this one actually got him banned from court again because of various allusions to the Earl of Leicester, and so yeah, but it wasn't
nice
actual.
Try, but it's Leicester.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, Leicester. All right. Well,
weird spelling though, right? I always thought it was Leicester, but I mean, as a kid.
Yeah. But this was actual thing he invented, and the Queen actually had one installed around 1596. And it was, as you described, it's the giant water closet thing above you, and you pull the little cord and it flushes and everything.
Yeah.
It was a version of that, I should say. So that was he was the first, thought to be the first flushing toilet in Britain at the time. At the time, people thought he invented the flushing toilet, but there's been flushing toilets around long before then. So it actually going all the way back to 2600 BC was the first known flushing toilet. So yeah, it's been a thing, but that's sort of how he's associated and why people thought that it's called the John. So yeah, that's the appetizer for today. I'm going to throw another log on the fire now.
If I asked you, can you still hear me while you're throwing that log on?
Yes, I can.
If I asked you what a bog was, would you know?
A bog? I mean, like a bog, like a
B-O-G.
marsh, like a marshy?
Oh, no. Okay, yeah, that's another word for bog. We like, as a kid, I think we'd call it, I think the bog was the main word that we'd use to describe a toilet.
Yeah.
They'd be like, I'm going to use the bog.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, weird, right?
Yeah.
Haven't thought about that in a long time, but all of this talk of toilets,
Yeah.
it made me think of two things. It made me think of slut holes and bog.
Yeah.
Because talking about rubbish, that was the best video ever. The best video ever made.
Yeah.
It was like the other what rubbish bins used to be called. Was it in London?
Yeah. And that used to just be a name for like someone who like was it just someone who like a maid or whatever? Was that right?
No. It was the word for a bin, like a refuse bin.
Yeah, but
What do
then
you
they
call
also
it?
had the like a slut was actually originally like something like who cleaned up stuff, like I think I like vaguely remember.
That's right. Yeah.
And then it morphed from there. But yeah. So anyways, yeah. So that's the appetizer for today.
Oh wow. If you look up slut hole on Urban Dictionary, you get a very different definition, which I'm not going to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to find a nice like old dictionary definition, but I can't find one. It doesn't matter. We'll carry on.
Okay.
Hope you enjoyed that ad read. I don't know what's wrong with me sometimes. What's up next?
We are going to talk now, jumping into the actual medieval times. And so, speaking of crap,
this is so far it was nothing to do with medieval times.
Yeah.
Everyone who's clicked on this has been extremely disappointed, and I'd invite them to smash that dislike button if they're watching the show on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely. So, how did they medieval times? How did people deal with all their poop and pee? Because obviously they didn't have like indoor plumbing, and mostly, I mean, some very elite did have a form of that.
They recycled it.
Yeah,
like they do on the International Space Station.
Yeah, commonly a lot of people think like they tossed it out the window or whatever. That's like a common thing, I don't know, depicted in entertainment and stuff. But did people actually do this? And the answer is mostly no, like contrary to popular belief, and with the caveat that of course we're talking about a large group of diverse people when we're talking about medieval times in Europe and whatnot. But and so there's exceptions. But we're going to look at like medieval Britons, for instance. They did sometimes toss their solid waste out the window, but it was not common for various reasons. But they did. We do know that at least there are records of some, because there was laws against doing it, and people who broke the law would of course be prosecuted in record of that. And obviously the laws didn't exist for no reason. But you can see from a practical standpoint why this wouldn't be super common even then. Is just first, when you're talking like one-story buildings, which were the norm obviously for quite a lot of history, you're not just going to toss your poop and stuff out the window, because it's just not going to be good to do that. Cause
great, it's just in my front garden.
Yeah, if you actually were going to open that window, like in the summer, it's not going to be good. And then you just step out your door, and that's also not going to be ideal. So it's not really something
worth of feces.
Yeah, not like something you would want to do for you, and your neighbors wouldn't appreciate it either. So it's just going to be a crappy time for everyone. So not surprising, this was
build a giant trebuchet. Did they have trebuchets in medieval times? That was Age of Empires.
Totally. Trebuchet would be great.
Trebuchet that up.
Yeah. So multi-storied buildings, though, as those started to pop up, the higher homes and stuff did occasionally seem to be toss some stuff out. But that's probably how the laws came to be passed, and to not do that. And so on that note, you could be fined, and your neighbors are obviously going to report you for this because they're not going to appreciate it. So, for example, and actually in the early 14th century, tossing anything out your window onto the streets of London, for instance, it could be garbage, could be human waste or whatever. You get a fine of 40 pence, if that's what P stands for, yes?
Totally does, yes.
Oh, awesome. Is that still a thing? Like pence?
Well, yeah. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to do anything under about $1.20.
Okay, no, but I didn't know if like the term like pence was still like a thing.
Oh,
yeah,
that's true. Yeah, because we had this weird old currency which was not on metric, so it would be like there's like 14 shillings in a nickel.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there were no nickels, but it's like it was so bizarre. But this wasn't that long ago. Like my parents would have used this.
Really,
it was like the 1960s or something.
Yeah, crazy. So for reference, that's about 108 pounds today, or about 142, somewhere in that range. It's obviously tough to when you're talking about like the 14th century to accurately inflate that to modern times, but it was a.
It sounds about right. Like if you drop a cigarette butt,
it
the fine is like £100 or something.
And people would notice, because they actually eventually had muckrackers and surveyors of the pavement who were employed to actually walk around and make sure the things stayed clean. And if they saw that someone had obviously you could pee or something, and you might be able to get away with that because there's very little evidence. But if you're tossing poop out your window, right, it's going to be obvious, and you're going to get a fine. And if these people could not figure out which house it came from, then they would just fine everyone in the little area of.
Wow.
So it wasn't like something. Yeah.
Some KGB right there, like grass on your neighbors or everyone's going to get punished.
Yeah, and I mean that didn't mean the streets weren't like clean of fecal matter, because you did have, of course, horses eventually, and particularly as that eventually when the horse-drawn carriage became a thing, and at its peak, like
horses is not the same though. Like that horse poo is not the same as human poo or dog poo.
No, it's I
don't know. It's not as bad.
There's a lot of it, and like in the 19th century, at the peak of that, there was an estimated 1,000 tons of horse dung per day deposited on the streets of London. So yeah, that was a bit of a problem.
Did we do a video about it, or am I wonder if this is, sometimes I wonder if it's an urban legend I've heard, or whether we actually did a video on it. But wasn't it the case that New York was so covered in horse poo, like back when horses and carriages and stuff were going around New York, that it was this massive public crisis? And then basically they invented the automobile, and no one knew what to do with it. It was like, what are we going to do? This is a huge disaster. And then the car came along, and it basically solved everyone's problem.
I would assume that was probably a thing, like, because it was a problem in London, like, and various cities like that. So yeah, So
this is why I don't care about the environment, because I assume some miracle thing's going to come along and solve all of my problems.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. It's why I just burn all my rubbish. I just throw it all in the fire.
Yeah, I used to live in a place where people did that. Like, actually, in the middle of nowhere, that's what people do a lot.
I heard about that. Like, there was maybe I thought I was talking to you about it, but I guess maybe not. About people burning their trash, like for real, like because there's no trash pickup or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. There was no trash pickup where I grew up, so people did that, but you also just would load it up in the back of your truck after like every month and take it off to a dump manually, which is pretty cheap actually. But in any event, going back to medieval times and human excrement. So while you could potentially have gotten away, of course, like we said, with peeing, getting away with pooping is not really going to be a thing. So it doesn't appear to be a thing back then. On that latter point, though, some people got clever about how they dispose of it. And I just wanted to mention this one because we've briefly actually alluded to this woman on another podcast episode. I don't remember which one. But so the 14th century London Assize of Nuisance. So it records various disputes between individuals and their neighbors, and tells of a Londoner named Alice Wade. So what she did, there was a pipe near her that would basically or a gutter that basically ran into a cesspit, like a latrine, and it would flush. So when it rained, that would flush that out. And so what she did is just rigged up a pipe to connect to that pipe from her window, and that would then or from her house and out into that. So her excrement would go into this pipe that would then go into the thing, the gutter that would drain into the cesspit to flush it out or whatever. And so this seems pretty ingenious. It gets it where it needs to go and whatnot. And she gets her own little indoor plumbing, and she's a problem solver, this woman. But it didn't quite go as planned. So here's the official note on that.
Whereas of old in the parish of St. Michael's, Queen Hithe, a gutter running under certain of the houses was provided to receive the rainwater and other draining from the houses, gutters and streets, so that the flow might cleanse the privy on the Hithe. Alice Wade has made a wooden pipe connecting the seat of the privy in her solar with the gutter, which is frequently stopped up by filth therefrom, and the neighbours under whose houses the gutter runs are greatly inconvenienced by the stench. Judgment that she removed the pipe within 40 days, etc. I wonder what that etc. means. It's like remove the pipe and...
I don't know. So
thanks for the specificity, Judge.
This, as ever, as we always mention, it's funny because this Alice Wade, she in the whole universe, in the history of the universe, there's only ever been one Alice Wade, this unique individual, and this is all history will ever remember of her, is that she rigged up this ingenious defecating pipe that,
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, that's depressing. All of us are going to be forgotten.
Yeah, she'll be forgotten eventually, but at least for now, her defecaking
we're
habits
keeping her
recorded.
alive.
Yeah,
we're keeping a memory alive.
Yeah, and just think about that. 14th century. She's 600 over a half a millennia from ago. like she would have never imagined. We're sitting here talking on our electronic devices across the world about her pooping habits.
I'm going to use a word I learned recently.
Yeah.
Would you say that she has Heristratic fame? Or would you say that...
Yeah.
Kinda.
Kinda.
Right? Yeah.
Kinda.
Okay. Because it's not really... We did a video about Heristratus, who was this guy who he burned down this beautiful palace just to be remembered.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Heristratic fame is the word that comes from that. And no, I mean, it's not bad. It's not a bad thing, what she did.
No, and it was clever. Like it seems like it's just, she just needed to flush it a little better. Like she needed some water to flush it all out instead of it getting stuck. She just needed to add a little bit. She should have held the number 1 in, taken the number 2, and then released the number 1. I don't know anyone who can actually do that. But, those details. Remember, maybe she could pee in a cup. Do her business, and then I don't know why we're talking about this. I apologize. Let's move on. Okay. So,
I mean, we could continue talking about this ingenious system. You say okay, like you're slightly disappointed. No, Simon, please do talk more about peeing in cups. I am fascinated.
So, if none of this, if this isn't what they actually did, and they didn't have indoor plumbing, most people, I should say. So what are massive sewer systems? What did they do? Where did they put it all? And that is rivers and fields was kind of where everything went. So, so they would basically, you have your bucket or your chamber pot that you would do your business in, and then eventually you would collect it and then go dump it into river is what most people did, or a gutter. Sometimes there were gutters designed to actually transport the waste to the river. So yeah, this was the thing, and then the rain would come and wash it out of sight, out of mind. And there was also you had like communal cesspits, which were basically just big holes in the ground where you everybody, it just accumulated there, and the urine would go in the ground, and eventually the cesspit would have to be cleaned out by these people called, and some people had their own personal cesspits in their homes if they were wealthy enough. So you had, and the cesspits were also called gongs, which is from the Old English gang, meaning to go, which kind of makes sense. So yeah, the liquid waste would be absorbed. The rest needs to be collected by people known as gong farmers, who were actually really well paid for, as you might imagine, for what they did. And their job was to basically just go in there and scoop it all out and take it somewhere. And so they would, and some of these, there was one, I can't remember. Oh yeah, it was 13 men, 5 full nights to empty out the Newgate Goal in 1281. There's a record of that. So some of these were pretty massive, and they would just take it all, pile it up on, wagons and stuff, and take it out to fields.
That's, by the way, do you know what that word is? That's the old word for jail. So they're emptying prisoners' poo.
Oh, okay.
Which is that's going to be. I just imagine it's being extra grim.
Yeah. So that was their job, to take it to sometimes ships. They would haul it off, and they would be used as fertilizer at designated places. But sometimes they would also just throw it in the river. They weren't supposed to. These gong farmers were not supposed to, because they were dealing in massive amounts. So unlike a personal person who could just go toss it in the river, that was allowed. But these gong farmers were not supposed to do that. They did sometimes anyway. But this was actually a pretty dangerous profession, as you might imagine. Some of these, they worked at night exclusively.
It's going to be gas in there as well, right?
Yeah.
Don't we let off gas that can blow people up? Like, don't sewers sometimes catch on fire? Is that a thing? Am I imagining? Is that just in movies?
I was trying to find a record of that, like of when, if any of them died, because they worked exclusively at night, and they were using like lanterns and stuff. So you would think that, but I couldn't find a record of anyone.
There's definitely some methane here somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I've seen people light their farts. That happens.
Yeah, I couldn't find a record of someone actually dying that way, of getting like blown up with the fumes or whatever. But there's people who say that happened to the gong farmers, but I just couldn't find a direct record of it. But there is plenty of record of gong farmers dying, because they would, like, sometimes the floorboards would collapse and they would just fall in, and then sometimes they would collapse with the fumes, and they could just fall in. And you will float, obviously, in the excrement, because it's very dense, but it's also very, like, muddy, and so you can get the suction problem, and the fumes, of course, pass out. And so there's plenty of people who listed as dying, the gong farmers, and other people. So we've had...
infection, surely.
Yeah, and during plagues, they got paid even more to do these.
But I mean,
yeah,
I saw that Jackass where I can't remember which one it is, but one of the guys, they talk to some scientist or whatever, and they're like, if we were going to theoretically jump into a septic tank, what sort of protection would we need? And he's like, oh, don't do that.
Oh, they didn't
you'd
actually
need
do
to
it,
cover
did
your
they?
eyes. You'd need to cover your butt. You'd need to cover like every hole on your body would need to be fully sealed. And then the next shot is them just jumping straight in there naked. And I'm like, aren't you, surely your eyes will get infected, your face, like if you've got some little cut.
Yeah.
And it's like the olden days. Surely people are all like messed up already anyway.
Yeah, that doesn't. Yeah. So yeah, that is people did fall in, just not just gong farmers, but people. Emperor Frederick the First, 1184. There was a record of him. The floorboards collapsed, and several people died in this one. And he clung to a window for dear life until someone came and helped him to not fall into the cesspit. And so yeah, Richard the Raker, who is only remembered in history thanks solely to sitting down on his own privy. He sat there, and the rotted boards broke underneath him, and he fell into the muck below. And to quote, he drowned in a dreadful manner, as recorded in the London Coroner's Roll of 1326. So, anyways, back to the gong farmers. So they had, it was a kind of a crappy job, as you might literally. So yeah, they just would sometimes. I should say what happens if they actually dump this stuff in the river as they weren't supposed to. And so we have the record of one guy. Where did it go? I can't find his name now. In any event, but what happened to him was he was caught doing this, and basically he was made to stand, speaking of what you were talking about, to stand immersed in fecal matter up to his neck and then pulled out. And then he was forced to just stand on public display for quite some time in that without, cleaning off, and just, yeah, that was his punishment for that. So in any event, and we also had, beyond these gong farmers cleaning, we have the cesspits, but we also had public latrines that were also just like directly into rivers. So there was one on the London Bridge that would just empty directly into the river below, just as people do. But as you can imagine from this is a problem. Like, this works okay-ish if the cities are small or the towns are small. It doesn't scale. This isn't a scaling system. And so as the British cities expanded, this became a major problem. And this brings us to, would you say, how is it actually pronounced? Is it Thames or Thames, the river?
I'm totally lost in the notes. I was
okay.
I was looking at, I don't know why, but there's a phrase here you've written called like lazy gong farmers. I think you mentioned it a minute ago.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all I can think of is this is a beautiful like gamer tag. Like, can you imagine, you're playing Quake 3 or whatever and you're lazy gong farmer. It just fits so, I don't know, it just sounds so perfect.
Yeah, that's what this notes, I've like skipped all over the place. I have no clue really where we are in the notes either.
Yeah, no, it's a little confusing.
Yeah.
And then there's also lazy gong farmer to stare at for a good 5 minutes. I don't know what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Wait, where's that word? What was the word?
The River Thames.
I don't know why you're coming
the
to me
River
for
Thames.
pronunciation.
No, because this is
internet,
British. This is like
anything.
It's the famous British river in London, right? Like the River Thames.
Oh, Thames.
No,
it's Thames.
Thames. Okay, yeah. I knew I wasn't pronouncing it right,
Thames.
so that's why I thought it.
Yeah, I do know how to say that one.
Yeah,
or you can also say Thames.
Okay, Thames.
No, you can't. I was lying.
Okay,
Thames.
Thames. Okay. So we're going to talk about that because as it scaled, we're kind of moving.
Or Tahames is also.
We're moving.
Tahames. Have you seen that Key and Peele sketch where he can't pronounce any of the children's names?
No.
Oh my god. Oh, well, I won't. Let's just carry on. I'm sorry. I'm interrupting way too much today.
So, the River Thames is
Tahames,
Yeah, Thames is a tidal river. If people don't know, it's a tidal river means things get pushed up back in, not just go out. And this, so as the city.
Oh yeah, that's true. It has this big gate thing now. I mean, now.
Oh, does
probably
it?
didn't in the past.
No, yeah.
Yeah, the Thames barrier.
Oh, okay. So yeah, they didn't have that back then, and so they had kind of just in London as the city grew, just everything kind of went in there, just garbage, like people just dumped every waste in there, and just
why not?
Out of sight. It's Poseidon's problem, It's just go out. But the problem is it's a tidal river, so stuff would kind of get pushed back up and collect in the muck below, and that's kind of what happened. And when that's happening for centuries, and then the city grows, so we're going to fast forward to the 19th century there. That's a problem. But it actually, as early as the 17th century, there started to be some, little news reports and little political things talking about how something needed to be done about how polluted that river was all the way back then. But people just kind of ignored, or politicians and everything just kind of ignored the problem until it became a major concern in the 19th century when you had, the cities swelling. And so you had many cesspits that were constructed to sort of try to take all the crap from everyone and make it work, and they would all drain. A lot of them would or be dumped in the rivers, and although you had all the wells around, so some of these cesspits were right next to wells that people used, which was a major problem when it's so close. So this became a bit of a problem, and we're going to talk a little bit now about the Great Stink of, I believe it was 18 something, because I'm jumping around in the notes.
1824, please be correct. 1858. I feel like we've done a video about this on Today I Found Out.
Yeah.
I'm fairly sure I've covered it on Top 10s as well. It might have even come up in Geographics. I could almost tell you the story of the Great Stink from memory.
Yeah.
Normally I read these notes ahead of time before we do these, and today David was like, did you read the notes? So I was like, nah, I didn't. And so the good news is I'm pretty familiar with this one. So,
all right, cool.
Maybe I'll have something clever to say.
Probably you might have stuff to add too from what I have. But so we had.
Hey, come on, low blow.
So we did have
my addition to this podcast is knowledgeable, excellent pronunciations, knowledge of the Thames.
Yeah.
All of this stuff.
Good. So we did, going back to like the wells, so you had these cesspits right next. So they had all these cholera outbreaks in like 1832, 1849, 1854. And it was, the River Thames was also used as a major water supply and so they're dumping everything and they're drinking from it, and it's also contaminating the wells around. So like at its peak, like the 1849 outbreak, 2,000 Londoners were dying per week from cholera. And stuff. So the leading theory at the time was it was from bad air or miasma. So just this something in the air, stinky air. It was smelly. And the father of epidemiology, that's probably better.
Exactly.
Epidemiology, Dr. John Snow, who came to the conclusion that it was not just smelly air, that it was actually something in the drinking water that was doing it. And he reasoned that since it affected people's bowels instead of their lungs, that it was probably something that they were eating or drinking or something like that. And he eventually did pen the pamphlet called On the Mode of Communication of Cholera in 1849, in which he did link it to the actually polluted water of the river. And so everyone kind of ignored him.
Which river is that?
The River Thames.
Thames? Yeah.
This
joke's getting really tired, but I like it.
He enlisted the aid of one Henry Whitehead, who was a minister, to sort of map out where people were getting the most sick from cholera, and this was actually in 1854. And so with this map, they were able to trace it to a single water pump, this particular outbreak, on Broad Street, which is Broadwick Street. And they convinced to shut down the pump on that well, and then the cholera outbreak in that area just died overnight, basically. But even with this evidence, it actually proving that he was correct, his theories still went largely largely ignored, and he died never sort of getting his due. He did later, but at the time, he died before people realized he was totally right. So this brings us to July of 1858, where we have the Great Stink. So the summer of 1858 was super warm, and the River Thames dropped completely significantly. So you basically, all this rotted sewage, all this stuff that had been in the muck is now baking in the sun. And it resulted in quite the stink in London and everything around there. And of course, we had like the Queen of England tried to take a little jaunt on the river, and she put a bouquet of flowers in her face, and it didn't work. So then she kind of cancel that. So papers across the country were going crazy for this and, reporting these sorts of things. And Parliament, which they had
I just wanted to ask, how do you feel about this? If there's a terrible smell and you can cover it with like some air freshener, right? Say you've done some nasty business in the toilet and it smells really bad. Would you rather, or someone else would you rather have air freshener or no air freshener? Because I feel like the common answer is spray the air freshener, right? Uh-huh. But then all you're doing is you're breathing in the weird fake air freshener chemicals, and you can like almost taste that weird undertone of human excrement on top of that weird,
See, this is a question
sandalwood
once pondered
Right,
because
I know.
would just...
And it's never a question I've asked because I've never, it's never come up.
Well,
but I
because
want to know what other people think of this because it's something I think about every time I take a nasty poo.
as an adult, I've always had the vent, the little fan. Is that like a thing where you just turn it, you just flip it on, and you don't need air freshener, right?
Well, and then you sit there for 5 minutes. What if you're in a public toilet? What if someone's about to come in?
Well, yeah, public toilet, but
then you're just like, it was person before me. That wasn't like, what if you're on an airplane? Oh, God.
I know people like light a match or whatever, and I don't actually think that really does much but make the sulfury, smoky smell.
I was going to say, like, I prefer that because I feel like it burns something off, but that's probably not realistic.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think that's the general idea is that maybe it does, but it just doesn't. I don't think it does. Like, not really. I think it's probably just the smoke smell is more strong or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah. What do you prefer?
Oh no, I'm like, let it fly. Like, don't use an air freshener. It smells weird. It just makes it. I feel like it contaminates it even more. Yeah. I mean, the ideal situation is just to have 2 separate bathrooms in your home or multiple bathrooms. But I live in an apartment and we just have 1 bathroom, which I think Americans might find a little bit absurd because you guys always seem to have every room comes with a bathroom. But that's common in Europe.
Not really. Usually you have your master bedroom. Usually we'll have a bathroom, and then you'll have 1 other bathroom per floor or something is sort of pretty common, I think. Yeah,
I feel that's common in modern builds.
Yeah.
But I didn't have an ensuite bathroom. We looked at putting one in, but I mean the building was built like 150 years ago. You can't really move the walls. And then so you can put in like a fake corner bathroom, but it always looks so fake and weird.
Mm-hmm.
So
you could get a pot, like you would do it old style. Little
that's preferable.
A little bucket.
Can you imagine that on Airbnb ensuite bathroom? You just get there and it's like it's just a little bedpan. You're like, oh great, thanks, and a bottle of like hand sterilizer.
Well, you just have to make it like you just have to. It's all in how you word it. You authentic old world style. Like for the
when that bathroom I was talking about, it had a decoration in it. Was like a 19th century bedpan was on top of one of the cupboards. Actually, this was in a separate bathroom. Mm-hmm. I still remember that weird bedpan that my parents thought was nice decoration for some reason.
Yeah.
Thinking back on that's a bit weird.
Yeah.
There was also an old asthma inhaler, like an asthma inhaler from like 1900 or something, which was, and it had the instructions on the side. We're really off track. If this is boring, just tell me and we can move on because we're just talking about 1900 asthma inhalers.
Let's go to the legendary English scientist Michael Faraday. He was openly criticizing the government for letting the Thames become filthy, and so he wrote the Observations on the Filth of the Thames, published in 1855, the Times newspaper. So this was actually before the Great Stink. In it, he noted.
Near the bridges, the feculence rolled up in clouds so dense that they were visible at the surface. Even in water of this kind, the smell was very bad, and common to the whole of the water. It was the same as that which now comes up from the gully holes in the streets. The whole river was for a time a real sewer. It's like Michael Faraday writing letters of complaint to the Times and building cages.
Yeah, and he also, a little crystal ball on what would happen, he noted.
If we neglect this subject, we cannot expect to do so with impunity, nor ought we be surprised if, ere many years are over, a hot season gives us sad proof of the folly of our carelessness.
Yeah, and his observation there was actually noted when the Great Stink actually took place, newspapers, so one account was.
In 1855, the condition of the Thames appalled the eminent scientists, but 3 years later, in 1858, the hottest summer on record reduced it to a state in which it offended a more influential body, the politicians, whose recently rebuilt Houses of Parliament stood upon its banks. This proximity to the source of the stench concentrated their attention on its causes in a way that many years of argument and campaigning had failed to do. Yeah, when it finally affects the seat of power, they're like, we should do something about this, right, guys?
Yeah, they did. So they had as noted there, they had their building right next to the river, and that was a problem. And there were people complaining, and it was largely getting annoyed. But so what they did at first for the buildings to make their own self comfortable is they used chloride of lime on all the curtains near the windows to try to get the smell to not come in the buildings, or at least
covering it up.
Yeah, cover it up. And so that didn't work.
Argument.
That
Should
didn't
you be
work.
Using that air freshener.
Yeah, that didn't work. So what they did is they just decided, rather than fix the problem, they decided to move the entire seat of government to Oxford. So that didn't go over well, and so they did spend a fortune building a brand new building for it, but that didn't end up lasting. So then,
wait, they built a new parliament in Oxford?
Yeah, and it didn't work out. So that didn't work. So what they did then instead was they spent many thousands of pounds in 19th century money, so it's quite a lot, trying to mask the smell more generally. So they used the chloride of lime over the actual exposed sewage itself on the dry, the part that's exposed and baking in the sun, to see if that would work, and that didn't work. And so they finally, with the complaints and the fact that it still stinks in their building, within just a few weeks, once they actually decided to do something, it just took a few weeks for them to pass a bill of £3 million. It was expensive, to refurbish the entirety of the River Thames. That was kind of what they wanted to do to get rid of the smell. And so they put a man in charge by the name of Joseph. I don't know.
I don't even know where you are in the
Okay,
notes,
Joseph Bazalgette.
I see that. It's actually Bazalgette.
Okay, yeah.
I have no idea. I just made that up. I'm sorry.
So
I just say it with such confidence. It's Bazalgette.
Yeah, so he was put in charge of this, and because 2 years before he'd actually drawn up a detailed plan of how to fix the problem, just no one wanted to pay for it at the time. So he was a civil engineer, and he basically, his system that he designed was a system of sewers for the city that would to supply fresh water and all that. And also he had a series of, make the system work better, he had a series of embankments along the river to help it flow more smoothly, so stuff didn't get built up on the shores and stuff like that. And who knows, maybe this is where that thing you were talking about, where stops the water from coming back up, the tidal thing. Maybe that was
Thames barrier.
Yeah, maybe that was part of his system. I'm not sure, but his system is still in use today. And once it was fully implemented, I think it took 20 years to finish it completely and connect all the sewers and everything up to do it correctly. And the cholera outbreaks kind of became a thing of the past pretty quickly. Once it was, and the last major one was in 1866 in a small area of the city that hadn't yet been connected to the new system. So that seems to fix the problem. And thanks to his forward planning, that system is still in use today in London. And he made it way bigger than it needed to be to account for basically just the expansion of the city over time. And it's
maybe more people will live here with time.
Yeah, and it's still all working out today. I mean, I'm sure they've expanded on it and everything, but so for his efforts there in actually finally fixing the problem after centuries, he was knighted in 1875 for his sewer system stuff. So in London no longer smelled quite as crappy from that. And that is our episode today.
Love it. He fixed the problems.
Yeah.
He saved the world.
Yeah.
This is why I don't worry about this stuff, because eventually someone will come along and save us all. I think it's going to be Elon Musk. If we have any Elon Musk will save us. This is why I'm not worried. Forget global warming.
Yeah.
Trump's right. Whatever. Elon Musk will save us.
Yeah.
Not really.
Sounds like a plan.
Probably care about the environment. I don't see any reviews for me to read, so I'm just going to thank anyone. Oh, it's been like 2 months. Have we have a review contest thing going on where when we get 1,000 reviews on iTunes, we will give away a $1,000 Amazon gift card.
Here, the episode is over and my fire just went out.
Oh,
it's well timed.
That's perfect timing.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I actually haven't looked at it. I was doing this last minute, so I didn't have a chance to look. I'm sure we've swelled the numbers there somewhat, and probably a lot of complaints about no episodes.
Yeah, they're probably like 2 stars. It'd be nice if they made episodes. Does this
yeah.
podcast make episodes?
Yeah, totally.
Have you guys passed away? No, we are still here.
Yep.
We occasionally make episodes.
Yeah.
I guess we'll be doing another episode soon because you promised.
I will. I got 4 more mapped out, and I'm hoping to knock them all out next month. We'll see how that goes. It'll be like 3 months from now. People are like, still not an episode.
Yeah.
No, but we actually.
I'm positively overwhelmed with
I am
anticipation.
positive we'll have at least 2, and I know that because we have 2 sponsors lined up for next month, and they get grumpy if you don't follow through.
That is true. That is true. Oh, poor ad guy Drew.
Yeah, I know. He's always having to. Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't have to deal with their angry emails anymore.
But poor guy.
To be honest,
Drew's
justifiably so.
No, they should be. They should be, and Drew's good. Drew's great. Yeah.
All right then. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Please leave us a review if you're listening.
Yep.
Wherever you listen. If you're watching on YouTube, which is also a possibility, smash that like button. If you didn't like it, that's what the dislike button's for, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's placed there for your pleasure. Daven, I forgot. It's been so long, I've forgotten how we actually end podcasts, and I'm just like rambling on. Is it my responsibility?
Yes.
Thank you for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon.